Good morning. I hope you all are doing very well. Had a lot of people ask me about my BR. Miss Tanya asked me about her this morning. I said, she hasn't taken a pain pill yet. I was wrong about that. She's taken one, I remember. And I was kind of surprised. Tanya said, well, she's so mean, I guess she can't feel pain. I thought, well, you took that better than I thought you would. I was ready to duck. She didn't say that. I did. BR knows you didn't say that. Whenever I say something, it's because it ain't true. Boy, that don't sound right, does it? I'm going to tell on myself. No, BR's doing great. I couldn't be more impressed with her. First time she's ever had something like this done, and maybe something to that mean, I don't know. Maybe she is too mean. Anyway, we're talking about the Sermon on the Mount. Today it's the two gates, two ways, and the two destinies. The key, of course, is two. It's two of each. This is what I want to talk about. We'll talk about the details a little bit, but we want to emphasize the two. It's either or. This is what life's all about. This is what life will come down to, either or. We make a choice. All of our life we make choices, but there's one either or choice. It's the only choice that matters when everything is said and done. Decisions are just a part of our life. So we don't like to make decisions a lot of times because we're not sure we're right. We're afraid we'll be wrong, and we try to avoid it. But decisions are a part of life, and like it or not, we'll make them. One thing I want you to understand, though, especially young people, when it comes to God gave us life. God determines what is successful and what is not successful. God is the ultimate judge, and that's a settled matter, right? Sometimes a person thinks, well, I didn't choose not. I wasn't anti-God. I just wasn't pro-God. And it doesn't seem as bad, does it? To come out and say, I want nothing to do with God, that sounds awful. And we don't say that. We may not want to, but what we say is, I don't want to be a Christian. To take a silent position, it's actually a default position. Even though you say nothing, it's rejecting God. Doing nothing is a rejection of God. Remember what I said, it's either or. Either a person looks to God or they do not. It's either or. So there's a default position that kicks in. I used to do that when I was young. I just didn't say anything at all. I didn't understand there was a default position, but to say nothing is a rejection of God outright. There is no such thing as silence when it comes to decision. All of us make a decision, and our decisions are very loud, and they're always heard, of course. In the ultimate decision, this is something God has pressed upon human beings since the beginning of time. Back when the Lord spoke to Israel, Deuteronomy chapter 30, through Moses, he said, I call heaven and earth as witnesses today against you, the people of Israel, that I have set before you a choice. You can have life or death. You can have blessing or cursing. It's up to you. Choice is yours. God could do either one. It all depended on what the Israelites wanted. If they wanted to be rid of God, for example, their default position is going to be death and cursing. They understood that. They knew what God was talking about. It's an either-or situation. Therefore, he said, choose life. Why? That you and your family may live. There's actually more at stake in this than what we think. It's not just me deciding for myself. It's me making a decision that's going to affect other people in my life. Maybe my parents. In my case, it was my parents. After I became a Christian, I taught my parents, and they both became Christians. Two of my sisters did as well. We have an effect on other people, but also equally, perhaps more, is the effect you have on your spouse and your children. It's not just us. When I make a decision, it's not just me. It's going to have an effect on everybody in my life, one way or the other. And we all have to agree that certain life is better than certain death. None of us run into a burning house with open arms, grabbing a hold of a pole that's on fire and holding on for dear life. We don't do that. Why would we do that going to hell? Well, people take to hell very casually. I'm not afraid of going to hell, or some statement like that. The fact of the matter is they don't believe in hell. That's the only reason you can draw a conclusion like that. None of us run into a burning house. We don't do it. Why? We don't want to get burned. And the same thing is true about hell. If I believed hell was real, I wouldn't run into it with open arms. I wouldn't want to get burned. But I don't believe there's a hell. I don't believe God would do that. And because I don't believe God would do that, I have nothing to fear. I don't have to make a decision. I can be indecisive. That's the way we think. But our thinking is wrong. Later in Joshua, after Moses had died, and now Joshua is the leader of Israel, God wanted the people, second and third generation, he wanted them to be told the same thing he had told the previous generation. Their parents learned that there was a consequence to their choices, and now their children and grandchildren, they needed to know that there was a consequence to their choices. So once again, Joshua repeats basically what Moses said. God speaking through Joshua, of course. God said, I have given you a land for which you did not labor. Now let me give you just a little bit of background. When Moses spoke, the Israelites were on the west bank of the Jordan River. And they were about to go across the Jordan and capture the land of Canaan. Now Moses, he didn't get to go because he committed a sin. And because he committed a sin, he had to die on Moab. Well, the torch was passed to Joshua. Joshua, you'll be the next leader of Israel. So now Joshua has taken Israel across the Jordan. In 7 years, 7 short years, Israel conquered the land of Canaan from north to south. It was now their possession. They were a slave people. Now they are a free people. They've got their own land. They've got their own country. They've got their own constitution. They've got everything they need to survive as a people of God. And now it's time to sit back and relax a little bit. But they've got to be warned not to get too comfortable, because this world is not their home. They're just passing through. Their treasures are laid up somewhere beyond the U. There was more to come to the story. And God reminds them, I gave you this land. You didn't win it in 7 years. I gave it to you. It was yours for the taking. It's a land for which you did not labor. Cities exist which you did not build. I took them away from the Canaanites. I gave them to you. And now you dwell in those buildings. You eat of their vineyards and their olive groves. These are vineyards and olive groves which you did not plant. I took what belonged to them, and I gave it to you. Why? Because I love you. Because you're my people, and I want to take care of you. Ask, and I'll give you the moon. I have given you everything you wanted. Now, if it seems evil to you to serve the Lord, if it seems like a bad decision, if it seems like something you just don't want to do, you'd rather get out on the weekends and party hardy watching NFL football on Sunday. If you'd rather go that route, then make a choice. Just make a choice. Come out and say it. Be a man. Man up. Choose for yourself this day whom you're going to serve. Who do you want to serve? Do you want to serve the gods which your father served that were on the other side of the river? Well, he's got on his mind two different kinds of gods. One was the gods of the Chaldeans. Terah, who was Abraham's daddy, him and Abraham and Lot and all them folks, they worshiped gods that were worshipped in the land of the Chaldeans. And then they got transferred over into Canaan land. They lived there for a spell, and then they went down into Egypt, where God was going to put them in a holding pattern for a couple hundred years before he brought them back into the land of Canaan. But while they were down in the land of Egypt, they were exposed to the Egyptian gods, and they worshiped their gods too. You see, Israel, even though we think of Israel as the chosen people of God, which they were also idolaters. They worshiped the gods of the Chaldeans. They worshiped the gods of the Egyptians. I mean, they worshiped every god. They weren't taking any chances. They played it very safe. Now, if that's what you folks want to do, Joshua is saying, if that's what you'd like to do, then go do it. There's no problem with that. If you want to worship the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you dwell, that's the land of Canaan. Back then, another thing I probably should tell you, people believed that there were gods of territories. In other words, the Canaanites living in Canaan, they had their own gods. Their gods took care of the land of Canaan. The Egyptians over here, they had their own gods. They took care of the land of Egypt, Chaldeans likewise. And sometimes when they did war against each other, it was a war of their gods. Their gods were fighting each other. And the superior god would come out the victor, and the inferior would come out the loser. And this was their mentality. Well, if you don't want to serve the gods of the Chaldeans, if you don't want to serve the god of the Egyptians, because here you are in the land of Canaan, if you prefer to serve these gods, well, go ahead. You're free to choose. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. You don't have to obey God. God's not going to make us. That's the point. He's not going to make us. He offers us something. He offers us his love. Either we want it or we don't. It's just that simple, folks. If you don't want it, well, that's understandable. I understand why people love the world and the things that are in the world. I've been there myself at one time. And if that's what people like, then that's what people ought to do. But then on the other hand, if you want to share the love of God, if you want to be a part of his love, the Creator, well, then by all means do that too. Joshua said, as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. My house made the same decision Joshua's house made. We're going to serve the Lord. Most of the houses in this building made the very same choice. We've seen what the world has to offer. We've seen what the Lord has to offer. And we love him because he loves us. The world don't love me. The world don't love me. Washington, D.C. don't love me. My employer never loved me. There's nothing in this world that ever loved me. But God did, and God does. Make a decision. In 1 Kings 18 and 21, Elijah forced the question upon Israel once again. He came to the people and he said, how long will you falter between two opinions? They were so messed up they wouldn't make a decision. Shall we worship the God of the Baals? Shall we worship Jehovah? Oh me, I'm torn. I think I need to call my counselor and see what my counselor tells me to do. And they'll make a 30-minute phone call for their ripe old price of $942 and get ripped off. Anyway, how long will you falter between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. If Baal is God, follow him. It's not hard, is it? It's not hard. Do what you want to do. It's not hard. Sometimes, and it bothers me so bad, sometimes preachers make God look like a beggar, as though God is begging for love. But God doesn't have to beg for love. God is love. Whether I love God or not, he's still going to be love. He doesn't need my love. He doesn't need me. Whether I embrace God or not, God is God, and he shall forever be. God wants us to be saved. He's proved his desire by allowing Jesus to die on the cross. All you have to do is look at Jesus, and you can see the depth of divine love. That's not a question. The only thing that remains to be seen is, what do I want to do? And if I don't want anything to do with God, well, God doesn't want anything to do with me either. He doesn't want me to be a part of his family. He would prefer I went and did what I enjoy the most. If you trust Baal, serve Baal. If you trust Jehovah, serve Jehovah. The choice is ours. We do what we want to do. Sometimes it's hard to be an adult. Hard to be an adult. Jeremiah said, thus says Jehovah, behold, I set before you an opportunity. You can choose the way of life. You can choose the way of death. What are you going to do? It was their choice. You know, God has given everybody the same choice. It's never changed. God is an unchanging being. Just as he gave the Israelites the choice, even so he gives people the choice today. We preach the good news of Jesus Christ, that salvation has come to people. Now, whether or not people want to embrace the good news, well, the ball's in their court, and they have to make a decision as to what they'll do. And whatever we decide to do, God will still be God. Nothing will change. John chapter 6, verses 66 through 69, Jesus taught what I call the Bread of Life sermon. At least when I preach it, I call it the Bread of Life sermon. And when the people heard what he had to say, we're told that many of his disciples, these are disciples now. These were the people who were following him, listening to him, believing him. Many of his disciples went back and they walked with him no more. When they heard more of what Jesus had to say, they liked him for a while. They really liked him when he fed them. But they did like him for a while, and then he said something they just didn't like. He said, you got to eat me, and you got to drink my blood. And they choked on his words. And they decided, I don't like him anymore. And they turned around and walked off. Do you notice what Jesus didn't do? He didn't say, hey, come back. I'll change what I said. I'll say something different. I'll never say those words again. No, that's not what he said. When they turned around and walked off, Jesus turned to his apostles, the 12, and he said, well, what about you guys? Are you going to walk away too? If they had have walked away, you know what he would have done? He would have chosen 12 more people to take their place. Even though it would have broke his heart if they walked away. That was their decision. And if that's what they wanted to do, then that's what they ought to have done. Nobody had them tied to Jesus. These were grown men capable of making their own decision. But they weren't going to leave him. Peter, speaking for the bunch, said, "You have the words of life. Where would we go?" From their perspective, there was nowhere to go. It was Jesus or hell. And they chose Jesus. From the beginning of the book to the end, it never changes. Choose, grow up, act like a man, be an adult for once, and make your own decision, whatever that decision may be. Now then, we're ready for this verse of Jesus's. Enter by the narrow gate. Wide is the gate, broad is the way that leads to destruction. There are many who go in by it. Because narrow is the gate and difficult is the way which leads to life, and there are but few who will ever find it. A wide gate, a narrow gate, a broad way, a difficult way. Many will enter, few will find. Destruction and life. Wow, that's one of the easiest sermons I ever taught. Not much to it, is there? A 12-year-old can understand this sermon easily and never miss a lick. And so can we. One is built on human righteousness. The other is built on divine righteousness. I'm a man. I'm a woman. Hear me roar. We're bad to the bone like Chucky. Human righteousness. We don't need God. Ain't that the way it goes? Or maybe I missed something. I see it every Sunday on the NFL. Watch a guy score a touchdown, you think he just conquered the world. The way he cuts a shine. He caught a ball. Let's give him $130 million. Is it ridiculous or what? There have always been, I love football, don't misunderstand me. It's ridiculous though. There have always been two systems of religion in the world. There's God's system and man's system. Divine grace, human works. Never changes. Religion of faith, religion of the flesh. Sincere and internal, hypocritical and external. Inspired by God, inspired by man. It never changes. Never. Nothing new under the sun. Nothing. It's just it's a repeat over and over. It's like when you watch CSI Miami. Once you've gone through all the episodes, what do? You start over back at the beginning again. Season 1, episode 1. Here we go, cranking them back out again. And we're sitting there watching CS Miami like, I know everything that's going to happen, but I sit there like a dumbhead and I watch what I know. That's the way life works, folks. Pick up a history book sometimes. Talk to Jeff McDaniel. He's a history teacher. He can tell you. Over and over and over and over. Nothing changes. It's the same old, same old. We can see our mistakes before we even make them. And we make them anyway. Choose for yourself. The evidence is in. We can look backward, we can look forward. The evidence is all around us. What's in your best interest? What's going to work for you and for your family? What's going to work for your parents? What's going to work for your children or your grandchildren one day? What's in their best interest? Can you put yourself on the back burner for once and think about somebody else? Stop being selfish and think about what's at stake here. I know you can do it. We all can, if we're willing to do it. There's two choices, and the Lord's going to make that abundantly clear. And I'm going to go through and preach these things as we get to them. But for right now, I just want to show you that the theme does not change in this chapter. There are two gates, the narrow and the wide. There are two ways, the narrow and the broad. There are two destinations, life and destruction. There are two groups, the few and the many. There are two kinds of trees. There's the good and there's the bad. Two kinds of fruit, the good and the bad. There are those who profess faith. Some of them are true, some of them are false. There are two kinds of builders. Some are wise, some are foolish. There are two foundations. One is rock, the other is sand. There are two houses, one secure, the other insecure. Doesn't change. You know why it doesn't change? It's life in miniature. It's life in miniature. It's as simple as the nose on our face, because God wanted to make sure we understand what's at stake so we can make a wise decision. If you would rather serve Baal, by all means serve Baal, if that's really what you want to do. But if you want to serve God, we'll serve God. Choose for yourselves. When I was young and I got to the point where I could vote, I had to register. I don't even know if they do that anymore, do they? I had to register to vote, so I went and registered, and I put down I'm a Democrat. You know why I put down I'm a Democrat? It's what my mom and daddy was. We're Democrats. Yeah, they're Democrats, so I'm a Democrat. What's a Democrat? I don't know what a Democrat is. But Daddy told me to put down a Democrat, and that's what I did. I signed up to vote. Sometimes people become Christians for the same reason. We're Church of Christers. You got to be a Church of Christer. Why? That's what my mom and daddy was. Well, my daddy was an infidel. My mama was a Methodist, so I had to think outside the box on that one. Started out Roman Catholic and didn't work out too good because Mama wouldn't hardly talk to me. Then when I got up with BR, I found the Lord's Church, and I found out these people, they're not as polished as the Catholics are, but boy, they say what's in that Bible. And you know what I did probably for the second time in my life? First time I decided to get married. Second time I was a man, I decided to become a Christian. I made my own decision, all by myself, because I was a big boy at the age of 24. And I chose how I wanted to live. Choose for yourselves. Reckon why the Lord repeats that so many times in the Bible? Is it that easy for us to forget? Time and time again. Choose for yourself. Enter by the narrow gate. This gate is pointed out. Look over in the corner. You see that door right there? Imagine that door right there is 18 inches shorter. Now let's make it 3 feet shorter. And that's a 36-inch door. Let's make it 2 feet more narrow. Imagine me trying to get through that door. You got to be kidding. I'd be oozing through the wood. I mean, I'd go through there like a roller because there's so much of me hanging off both sides. Can you imagine me trying to get through that door? Tough door. That's what Jesus said. He said, look over yonder, boy. Look at that door over there. That's the one you got to go through. What? Well, they were all skinny, so it wasn't such a problem. But go through that door. Why? Because there's a default door. If you don't go through that door over there, that little one, you're going to go through the other one by default. You ain't got no choice. You're going to pass through one door today. Which one you going to pass through? You can go through that little one, you can go through that old big door. Well, it's wide. I can get through it driving my car. We can get through it driving 100 cars. It is so wide. It is. Whoever built that gate, they put some thought into it. They were nicer than the guy that built that little gate over yonder. They cared about people. They didn't want people to get scratched. They didn't want them to look silly or trying to roll through the little skinny door. Built wide door. It could accommodate 100 million people at one time. It could accommodate 1 billion people at one time. Not a problem. It was so wide. And the way, oh, wow. The way was wonderful. Covered with all kinds of fun. Man, there were bowling alleys. There were skating rinks. There were ballparks. Everything your little heart could desire. It was all there. You look past that gate and you look down that Broadway and you say, man, oh, man. And then you look back at that little skinny gate again. The skinny gate, enter through the skinny gate, you have to be kidding. Well, the problem with the wide gate, the Broadway, is that it leads to destruction. And the people knew what he was talking about. It leads to eternal death. The Jews knew that at the end of life's way, there's heaven and hell. That's all that remains. And if you don't go to one, you go to the other. When he said destruction, they knew exactly what he was talking about. So I enter through the skinny little door, because at the end of that door, it's not destruction. It's the easy door, the fun way. Destruction lays on the other side. And there are many people who go in that door. Many. Why, there's so many people goes through that door, it looks like nobody's going through that little skinny gate over yonder. Who wants to go through a skinny gate when you go through that big broad gate? Narrow is the gate. Narrow, that's an understatement, isn't it? Restrictive is the gate. You want to get through it, you're going to touch. Your head's going to rub, your feet's going to rub, your belly's going to rub, and your back's going to rub. There's only one way you can get through that gate. You're going to have to work for it. And it's going to be very hard or difficult, as the Lord said in this text. Difficult time trying to squeeze through that little gate. But this gate, it leads to life. That's what's on the other end, is life. And there are only a few, by comparison to the many, there's only a few that's going to find the gate. I just pointed the gate out. But according to Jesus, only a few will ever even find it. It'll be out of sight to the masses. In Luke 13:24, people asked if only a few were going to be saved in the day of judgment. And Jesus said, many, I say to you, they will seek to enter. That word seek means they got to work at it. They got to labor. It's laborious. Trying to enter through that gate that we preachers throw open every week, as though all you got to do is keep on chewing your gum and walk on through this gate. Because God loves you, and the only thing God has on his mind today is your salvation. Sometimes I don't think we're too nice to God, the way we present him to people. Jesus said, you're going to have to seek the gate. You're going to have to work and work and work just to find the gate. And they will not be able. He said in the beginning of the verse that you have to strive to enter through the narrow gate. The word strive comes from a Greek term that means to agonize. We've heard of the agony of defeat in sports. You ever see the face of that guy that is defeated? See all the muscles and the veins popping out of his neck? A woman having a baby strives to have that baby. That's what Jesus said. You've got to agonize. You've got to agonize to find that gate. It's not easy. It's not easy. It's hard. And you're going to have to put some effort into it if you ever find it. But if you do find it, and you can get through it, on the other side there is eternal life, which is better than destruction. A long time ago, a preacher gave me an image I've always had in my mind when I think about this narrow gate. He said, imagine you had a big bag on your back, and that bag was filled with pride. And you got down on your knees and you tried to wiggle through that gate. There wasn't no way that big old bag's coming through. Imagine a bag is like Santa Claus big. Imagine trying to pull that bag through that little narrow gate. Man, that's all you can do to get yourself through that gate. How are you going to pull that bag of pride through that gate, will you? Well, you can't get it through there. That's why Jesus said you've got to agonize. You got to fight to get through there. Because you got to turn loose of that pride. You got to turn loose of your jealousy. You've got to turn loose of your hate. You've got to turn loose of the world. Because that's the only way you can fit through that gate. Would you like to be a Christian? If you would, got to go through that gate. You can get through it if you want to. Doesn't matter how big you are physically. Look at me. I got through it. It's what's inside you. That's what enables you to go through the gate or not. It's that bag you're packing. Whether or not you can turn loose of it. And you can, if you will. If you want to be a Christian, you ought to hear Jesus. Well, you just heard what he had to say about the narrow gate. You ought to believe him, trust him that he told you the truth. And you are to be immersed in water, buried like he was in a sepulcher, except you're going to be buried in water as Christians. How am I doing on the agonizing part? Never stops, does it? You always agonize over a number of things. And so many times we feel like we failed. And we need our brothers and sisters to pray with us so we can feel clean again, so we can feel whole. So we can feel accepted.